Yo, I'm Courtney, what's up, and welcome to discussion time. Today I'm going to be discussing Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I actually finished this book last week because, if you didn't realize, I've been inactive for the past few days, and that was because I was at a church camp with my youth group, and I got back yesterday. I feel dead inside, but I wanted to film this review because I just got to discuss this book with you all. So that's why I'm here today doing this discussion video for Pride and Prejudice, and this isn't really a book talk. This is just more me getting my opinion out there on this book, since this is indeed a classic. This is what I did last year with Catcher in the Rye, because that was the book I had to read for last summer. And this summer, I actually got to choose what book I had to read for my summer reading assignment, and that's why I chose Pride and Prejudice, because I've just been wanting to read this for a long time, and this was the perfect opportunity. If you haven't read this book yet and you don't want to be spoiled, I would leave. I mean, you don't have to. This is just me getting my opinion out there, really. But I am going to be spoiling some stuff, so if you don't want to be spoiled, like, you can leave. But if you don't care, like, you can stay, you can do whatever you want. But I'm going to start discussing right now. So first, I'm going to start off with talking about the stuff that I liked from this book, because I hate to say it, but I feel like there was more stuff I disliked about this book than I liked, to be honest. I obviously adored Elizabeth Bennet, our main character. I thought she was amazing, and I kind of saw myself in her, mainly just because, one, she loves to read, like I do, obviously, and two, she can be super sassy and savage when she wants to, and yeah, I can be savage when I want to, too. You don't see that a lot, but I can. I just really appreciated Elizabeth's sassy remarks and her humor. It was just so good. This book had me laughing. Surprisingly, this was a really funny book, and that was just something I wasn't really expecting, because going into this, the only things I knew that there were two characters named Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, and they were going to end up together. That's all I knew about this book. But this book had such great humor, and I enjoyed it, especially Elizabeth's humor. I thought she was hilarious. And I also really appreciated Elizabeth for her standing up for herself and women by trying to break the stereotypical ways women are seen as during this time period by, like I just said, taking a stand for herself and being like, you know what, man, you're wrong and you're stupid. Like, us women can do stuff. We're smart. You don't have to marry us for money, blah, blah, blah. Like, we can do stuff, okay? And don't tell me that Elizabeth is not a feminist, because she is. Another thing that I loved about this book was Jane and Mr. Bingley. Oh, they were so nice and cute, and I loved them together. They were like the glue to this story, honestly. They were what kept me going and kept me reading this book, because let's be real here, the Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy drama was just too much for me to handle sometimes. Mr. Bingley's sisters can go joke for pretending to be nice to Jane, and then just all of a sudden moving to London, and then Jane went to London, and every time she tried to talk to Mr. Bingley or see him, they were like, oh no, 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 and then they would go see her and be nice, but they were being rude behind her back, and I hated it. And I'm just so glad that they didn't get their way, and Mr. Bingley and Jane still ended up together and got engaged, and it was the most beautiful thing. And then the last good thing I want to talk about for now, because I don't know why, but I can only think of 3 good things right now. But the last thing I want to talk about is the relationship Elizabeth has with Jane. I just loved her sisterly bond, because it just reminded me so much of the bond I have with my own sister, because it's like I have one older sister and then it's just me. And I just saw my own sister in Jane, because Jane is just such a genuine and nice human being, and that's just like my sister. And then I saw myself in Elizabeth, because like I said earlier, she is a reader and it's also super savage, and I just love their bond and how they talk to each other all the time, and I really loved it so much. Now we move on to the bad stuff, which there's a lot of bad stuff that I have to talk about. So this is probably the biggest thing that I disliked about this book, which this has changed. Like, after finishing the book, I like this person now, but in the beginning, I did not like Mr. Darcy at all. I remember when Mr. Darcy showed up at that ball, and you know, Jane and Mr. Bingley were dancing and talking, it was beautiful, and then he was having a conversation with Mr. Darcy. Mr. Bingley was all like, oh, you know, Jane has a younger sister and she's actually sitting behind you right now. And then Mr. Darcy had the nerve to turn around and look at Elizabeth and then turn back and just be like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna dance with her. And I was like, what the heck? Mr. Darcy was so full of himself. Like, he has so much pride, and that's why in this title, you know, Pride and Prejudice, he is the pride, because he is a very prideful man, and I did not like it. I will not deny the fact that every time he showed up, I was like, oh no, the worst person ever has showed up. Like, this man can go choke. And when he left, I loved the moments where he wasn't there. It was so glorious and peaceful, and I was like, oh, look, Mr. Darcy isn't here anymore. I can read this book in peace. It was great. But then we went to Pemberley. I can't tell you how disappointed I was when it was like at the end of volume 2, and Elizabeth is with her aunt and uncle, which I adore her aunt, by the way. I thought she was amazing. That was another good thing. But they are going on that tour, which I found interesting. But they decided to go to Pemberley, and I was like, no, let's not go there. No, let's not, because that's where Mr. Darcy lives, and I did not want to go there. I did not want to see him. But obviously, when they show up, he shows up too. Oh, so he wasn't at Pemberley, because he showed up there. Did he go to London? I don't remember. I finished this book last week, okay? Anyway, when Elizabeth and her aunt and uncle show up, Mr. Darcy shows up, and then 5 seconds later, he's alone with Elizabeth, and I'm just like, code red, this is bad. Something bad's about to happen. This is not okay. Mr. Darcy, get out! And then, obviously, something bad happened, because he admitted to Elizabeth that he was in love with her and asked her to marry him. Before this happened, every time Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth talked to each other, it was basically arguing. They did not get along. They did not agree with one another. There was no sexual tension or romance or nothing. It was just arguing. I wouldn't even like consider them friends. Like, it was bad. Bad friendship. Not good. But then, the next time they see each other, he proposes, and it was so out of the blue. I was not expecting it. Like, I hated it, honestly. But then Mr. Darcy took a baby step towards redemption by writing that letter and giving it to Elizabeth and just be like, this letter explains myself. And I am so glad that he gave her that letter, because it did explain himself. It explained everything, including all the stuff about Mr. Wickham. Mr. Wickham was another thing that I disliked about this book, and I still do not like it at all. Like, he can go choke. When Mr. Wickham showed up, I was like, you know, he seems like a nice, genuine person, and the conversations he was having with Elizabeth were really nice. And I was like, you know, they would make a good couple. But since I already knew Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth were going to end up together, I was like, obviously this is not going to happen. But I never admitted to myself, though, that I liked Mr. Wickham, because something felt off about him, because when he started talking about Mr. Darcy, it just felt like every time they talked, they always went back to Mr. Darcy and what Mr. Darcy did to him, and I was like, something doesn't feel right. And I was right. There was something wrong with the dude, because he tried to marry Mr. Darcy's little sister just for the money. And I was like, dude, you terrible human being. But then things got even worse, because this is another thing that I disliked, that Lydia had the nerve to run away with Mr. Wickham, get married, and hide. Like, they were hiding, but then they still managed to get married. And I hated Lydia for doing that. I was like, no, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. I don't like Lydia or Mr. Wickham, because he doesn't deserve Lydia, and plus she's so young. She's my age. She's 16 when she's married, and that's how old I am, and that is so weird. Also, another weird thing, and another thing that I disliked about this book, was the fact that Mr. Collins, their cousin, proposed to Elizabeth, which I know for this time period, that's normal. Like, back in that time period, people married to their cousins all the time. But for me, as a 16-year-old girl reading this book in the 21st century, I'm just like, that's incest. Another thing that I didn't like about this book, which I don't know why I keep calling this things. Like, it's mainly people. Another person that I didn't like in this book was, surprisingly, Mrs. Bennet. I don't like her, and it's mainly just because I didn't like the fact that she wanted her daughters to get married, so they didn't lose their home, because if none of her daughters got married, then Mr. Collins would take their house. I think what I didn't like about the situation was that Mrs. Bennet wanted her daughters to get married not for their happiness, but for her own, because she didn't want to lose all the beautiful, rich stuff that she has, and also the home she lives in. And I didn't like that. She should want her daughters to get married so they're happy and find someone that they're in love with, not so she can keep her stuff and her home and be rich because her daughter's married someone rich. Which, by the way, I don't even know how she approved of Mr. Wickham, because he's broke. But the book still ended on a good note with Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy getting together, which was really nice. I was really happy when they got together, surprisingly, because by that point, I liked Mr. Darcy because he was definitely a better person at that point. And so when he proposed again, I was really happy for them. I'm just so very glad that I read this because it was really good. I really liked it, and now I can talk about it with people, and now I just need to watch the movie because so many people love the movie and I see stuff about it all the time, but I still haven't watched it, so I gotta go watch it ASAP because I'm just so excited. So many people have said such good things about the movie, the one with Keira Knightley, and I'm so excited. But that, my friends, are my thoughts and feels on Pride and Prejudice. I hope you all enjoyed this discussion video. Thank you all so much for watching this video. And I'm Courtney. I'll see you all next time with a new video soon. Since I'm back, I'm going to be making plenty of videos this week. So I'll see you all then. So